participants that highlight priorities and work to make proposed recommendations more relevant and concrete. So it's an open discussion. Right, Judith, you're going to have to speak into a mic.
Thank you very much. I attended the Addressing Youth and Mental Health breakout session a few days ago, and I did that in my capacity because I'm an intern educational psychologist. And so my whole thing comes from the fact that I don't think and this is specific to the South African context, I apologize for those that are not, I don't think we're using life orientation as a subject in schools to its full extent. When I did my internship last year, I was working in a private school where there was an actual module, part of the timetable and curriculum that focused on psychosocial support. So the learners did all the necessary subjects, but were also learning how to manage difficulties, promoting resilience, because not everyone can afford to go to a psychologist, especially because of how costly they are. But the school had provided that resource. But the unfortunate thing is that I was working there as an intern because it is a private school. It's not provided in the public sector. So there are a lot of children that fall through the cracks. So I've got 2 recommendations depending on what is feasible and possible within our South African infrastructure. One, I think that the training of internships does not accommodate intern educational psychologists. For instance, clinical psychologists are placed in public hospitals where they're able to help and service the public, but then the government, the health department covers it. The first recommendation is that it would be nice if the Interfaith Forum could kind of lobby or push for interns, because we're available, we need the training, for us to be placed in public schools instead of only servicing private schools, and then have the Department of Education cover our pay, because in that way we're offering a service that's needed. If that is too lofty and too far and maybe too difficult, then it leads the adaptation of life orientation to include real life coping skills that can help students learn. For primary school, they can just make it maybe a psychosocial support where they teach, because in the private school I was in, they were learning how to deal with challenges, bullying and all of that. And so I really hope this could happen, because I saw a big need as I was working as a training psychologist. Thank you.
I think it's important, the thing that you have raised. And is there anybody who wants to talk into that issue first? I think that's going to be important. But before we do that, my father on my left-hand side wants to say 1 or 2 things.
Chair, I just want to make this observation that the theme of this conference is Ubuntu in action. And now, if you take Ubuntu, the first thing, we must know that the whole of Africa, specifically south of the Sahara, you have Mundu in Ndebele, you have Muntu in Chewa, you have Muntu in Zulu, you have Munu in Tsonga and Shona, you have Hunu in Karanga. Now, I haven't seen a presentation that explained what this Muntu comes from. Because Muntu is a human being and is also the name of the sun. You break down the sun in M, which is mind, U, which is soul, Ndu, which is body. And in Hinduism and other religions, they will talk about mind, body, or spirit, which means the human being therefore becomes a mind, body, and spirit, and therefore the human being is an embodiment of the sun god. But now we are in Africa, and then we talk about Ubuntu. There's no explanation of this. And what actually happened is I come from a religion called Karaism, African spirituality or philosophy of the sun. We are oppressed here in Africa as the indigenous voices. And now when this conference concludes, it is going to say, we met in Cape Town in Africa, these are the resolutions. Whereas the voice of the Africans and their understanding of Ubuntu is suppressed. I chaired a session with my sister here. She said, look, it's God and we agree on God, all of us. Then comes Ubuntu, and we must break down that Ubuntu. But I just think that this conference is going to fail because of intolerance of what Africans are and what they are saying, because we can talk about Ubuntu, which is a central concept of African spirituality. But we see a video there, there's a mention of Ubuntu, but there's no input on what Ubuntu is. What are Africans themselves understanding about this concept? I just think that that is unfortunate. But I want to just conclude by saying, I would agree with the Roman Catholics. They use a sign XP. Now at the center of XP, which is the Kiro monogram, there is a circle standing for a woman as a supreme being, and the son as the child of a woman. So in Africa, we say that God is a woman, not a man. And that is the starting point, which must be addressed. Then the son, which is the son of a woman, then is mind, body, and soul. And all of us are mind, body, and soul, which means it's wrong to say there are people who are Christians, others are non-Christians, because the word Christ means in the soul of every human being, there is the Spirit of God, the soul of God, the body of light of God, and therefore the school curriculum that we have is Eurocentric. It doesn't talk to us as African people, and now we talk about food security. But the Europeans take away our land and mineral resources. There's no poverty in Africa. They impoverished us. Now after impoverishing us, they want to say to us, there is food insecurity. Where does it come from? And they say in schools, there are traditions. I work with students at the University of Pretoria. They say when they are possessed by the spirit, they get arrested and sent to prison because the West doesn't understand African traditions. So we have a crisis of misunderstanding. So I suggest that in plenary, when we finalize things, there must be an African definition of what is Ubuntu, where does it come from, what it means. Otherwise, this theme would not have been appropriate.
All right. Remember, we are on the African continent, and I think that is true. Okay, I saw my sister on there first, and I come to you, and then third, and then one more.
Thank you, Prof. I work in the higher education sector, and I wanted to pick up on the psychosocial element. So I'd like to recommend that when we look at educational systems, what I've also experienced is that the introduction of traditional religions, or just that diversity of religious beliefs, is absent. I believe it's absent because people don't feel competent to speak about it in the curriculum. And I'd really like to support the recommendation that in our society we have these interfaith forums where youth are quite active. And I was quite impressed by the youth, actually. The way that they have this ability and this capacity to see beyond. And that maybe, this new world that we speak about, where there's this oneness of religious teachings, I've seen the youth express that in the conversations that I've had in this space. So I would like to recommend and support the recommendation that we put the youth in the forefront of this endeavor in the educational sector, and that there be a closer collaboration between the Department of Education and the Interfaith Forum, particularly with youth, and that we integrate the messages that these youth have in the curriculum. Reason being that youth are more capable of influencing those younger than themselves. And the manner in which they're able to engage in participatory discussions with those that are younger and to inspire them to this vision that we're speaking about has become evident. So I'd like to support that recommendation, but to expose it to the interfaith group for youth to be involved centrally in the education system.
Sorry, I just looked up and I wanted to make sure that we finish off at 9:30. So I'm sure we all would want to say quite a number of things, but I think we want to give everyone an opportunity as much as possible. So please bear with us. Time is always an issue. So if you want to make a recommendation and just maybe support of the one or two lines so that we can go through and get as many voices as possible.
Good day. My recommendation is that the religious sector plays a very important part in our education spheres, and the potential is immense. And I think what department has to do is get the buy-in, and this is in South Africa and all other countries, from the religious sector. And that will be done when department doesn't antagonize the religious sector by introducing things which are ideologically foreign to religious sector. So in your department of education, generally the mandate is that all education has to be neutral. And sometimes we'll find in terms of religion, they won't force a religion down the throats of our children, which is fine, but they'll promote other ideologies which are foreign to the religious sector. For example, and I'm not saying anything about the society, but the LGBTQ movement, they'll force their agenda down the throats of our children while it's foreign to our religion or our culture. So in doing so, you're actually creating a issue in society, and you're not actually assisting resolve issues in our society. It's similar to forcing any particular religion down the throats of our children. While we understand that you teach children, there's diversity in society, that's all in its place. But don't promote one ideology over others, because in reality, the way we look at it as, as people of religion, is these are religions of their own. They might not be called religions, but in essence, their own worldview, they have their own assumptions, and they're based on their own, conception of what is a human, what is an ideal human, conceptions of God, etc. So I think it has to be neutral, and once we find that neutrality, then religious leaders will be more favored to actually support the education system. And there won't be this issue of people telling their children not to go to school or take their children out of school because they feel school is a safe place. But now once you try to, when you start antagonizing the religious sector, they'll obviously now withdraw their students from the schools, and they'll encourage students not to go to public schools, and then we'll have these issues in the future.
No, thank you very much, my brother there, and then we'll come back to my sister.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. To the point of my sister Judith over there, in the past, in the public schools, we actually had guidance teachers. I'm one of them there, and that was actually phased out. There, I think it's now a matter of one psychologist serving 10 plus schools in an area, which is impossible. It cannot be done. So as a recommendation, first get psychologists in schools. If that cannot be reached in the short term, then we should at least have community counselors. And that's a place where the religious community can come in, because they are automatically counselors. When people die, when people are ill, the religious ministers and also the elders in that community go in to support. So in our schools here, if there are cases of suicide or violence or of whatever kind of trauma in the school, then there should be intervention from the religious communities. In Cape Town, I'm from CTII, which is the Cape Town Interfaith Initiative. We already do it on a grassroots level. So when something happens, we just find out who of our members are available, and some people will go out and assist in the school. Right? But that's at a very small scale. There are many religious communities, so that's where we need integration. Speaking to the subjects, and also to Professor Motsega's point earlier, we're talking about, and my brother over there, we're talking about religions. These are the historical religions that are represented here. The religions of prehistory are the native, the indigenous, or the traditional religions. Right? So what I'm calling for is an an ensouling of our society. In Africa, when we talk about soul, we normally talk about music and that vibe, but we all know what we mean when we talk about soul. So this ensouling of society there. So when I'm in the workplace, when I'm doing economics, I should have a soul about how I go about things. So that's what we should strive for. Instead of having a society that's Christian, that's Hindu, that's Buddhist, or that's Muslim. So going and digging into what the prehistoric religions can tell us. So that's where we should go. Thank you.
No, thank you very, very much. Then my sister there.
Thank you. It looks like everyone's on the same page. I want to just say that when we think about our education system, it's a very hard-powered thing. We're teaching them all the facts and being logical. And that actually can create a lot of insecurity and anxiety. So what is required, what Professor is saying, is that we need to bring the soft powers in. And it's not religion, it's spirituality. So if we take all the qualities of peace and love and harmony and acceptance from our religions, and we actually create a spirituality which allows us to have acceptance and tolerance and internally feel secure and belonging, then the child in its environment will actually perform a lot more. The issues we have is that we teach things like stress management, positive thinking, and during education, during exam time as well, the child is intellectually aware of its knowledge, but it cannot cope with the pressure. So we're not giving the skills. So when we say life orientation, we're giving the child capacity to deal with its emotional, spiritual self. And I think we must minus religion, because even if you think of LGBT, it's not about a religious thing, but it's an acceptance. So we need to teach acceptance within our schools rather than actually just giving people information. So I would really recommend that we find a way to bring the life orientation as a proper, structured, not just a consuming of time early in the morning, but that there's some very clear thoughts put together as to what children can do. So something very simple also, like if the children sing, they play, they also are ways in which they become close to each other and they create a deeper sense. And I think these elements are missing in our curriculum. So I would think that let's think about it seriously. And bringing the youth is going to be very beautiful, because youth are still working from their intuition, and adults are living from their past history and they're bringing baggage on board. So youth is an important element in this study as well.
No, thank you very much. I mean, if one looks at the schooling and the primary education and the tertiary education, of course, it's our young people that are involved all over. So we'll have another one first in Koshi here, and then one at the back there, and then Professor Masoma, and then Jane, and then we come back to you. Mark, can we just get a mic rolling there? First in Koshi on my right-hand side.
I was going to comment on the challenges faced by indigenous people, particularly Tlhatukasen in South Africa, in the context of building collaboration solution across communities, in line with the theme of the of the conference. I thought that maybe we will have an opportunity to present, but the group were presented in such a way that we couldn't have an opportunity to present the our presentation as indigenous people. But I structured my presentation into three categories. The misrepresentation in an academic sector. I'm speaking here as a PhD candidate who struggled. You know, when I studied my honors, I had a problem with the supervisors because they forced us to think in the box. They constrained us. As a result, I faced a couple of disciplinary hearings accused of plagiarism. So just because of the way we think as indigenous people is not accommodated in the main curriculum system of South Africa. And also exclusion of indigenous epistemologies. Traditional knowledge, language, methodologies are sidelined or treated as false wisdom instead of legitimate academic discipline. Lack of indigenous scholars in leadership, few indigenous academics hold decision-making position in universities, leading to ongoing bias in research priorities and funding allocation, the misrepresentation in religious sector, demonization of indigenous spirituality by colonial influence frameworks, and loss of sacred sites and ritual spaces. Many of our places, particularly I wanted to talk about us as Kamatik Mata. We have lost a sacred ground in Kofimvaba, the mountain of Kamata. So we have been trying to engage the Premier to reclaim that site. And all our temples were demolished by the colonial Christianity. As a result, we couldn't have an opportunity to speak during the time of the Truth and Reconciliation. Our narrative has been suppressed. So there is no remedies that are put in place to assist us. Our recommendations are the underlying problems across all sectors. Colonialism education, the foundational problem is that education in South Africa was designed during the colonialism to assimilate indigenous people into a Eurocentric worldview, erasing their identities, wisdom, and social political agencies. We recommend in this, we recommend in this conference the integration of indigenous knowledge system into a formal curriculum at all levels. Secondly, establish indigenous-led research institute that can set their own priorities, empower indigenous spiritual leaders within interfaith and intercultural dialogues, economic exclusion of framework to protect intellectual property, natural resources, and cultural heritage, the cross-community collaboration that ensure equitable representation of indigenous voices in decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, I just want to get myself bearings right. Well, there's 1 there, 2, 3, and 4, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Inkosi has covered a number of the things I wanted to highlight, but I want to emphasize on 2 areas. One is paying attention to the younger ones, especially here in South Africa, where trauma is a daily issue. I mean, we've just been talking about the issue of poverty. And so I think we need to move to a point where the school is more like a home, where children can receive all of the required attention for their lives, not just education, but I mean, religious leaders showing up for the children, community leaders showing up for the children, food at a better level than what is available at the moment, especially if we're acknowledging that poverty is a main problem now. But I'm more concerned about the issue of trauma. I think we work with young people in my organization, and we've discovered, I mean, we've even had to employ a psychosocial support person so that in the schools where we are working, we can make sure that young people are taken care of. So it's a great need, and that person that spoke about it was on the point there. I think we have to make sure that in the schools, in all of the G20 community, that there is attention paid to that. The point that Ngozi has covered, I just want to add a little bit on it. Not just the indigenous knowledge, but the fact that our education system is still teaching about 1652 and all of that, when there are really current issues. You know, the young people that have finished high school don't know much about even our political dispensation here in South Africa. People that played a role here in South Africa, they don't even know much about you, Prof, sitting there, and the role that you played. So there's a need to be able to, I think we need to rearrange the whole education system, especially here in South Africa, to speak to current affairs. I don't think we still need the French Revolution in the education system. We need to move a little bit beyond that. Lastly, the tertiary education has lost its value. I don't think in South Africa only. I think I would say in most countries. I think one of the things that we need to move towards is to, I mean, there are PhD people who are wandering the world trying to find jobs. That can't be the way of life. There are master's degree people who are struggling to find jobs. That there has to be a rearrangement of society, governments, employment sector. Otherwise, if education loses its value, how else are we going to make a change in society? That's what I want to bring.
No, thank you very much. Before we go to Professor Musoma, when I was in school, I was always taught that the primary educators are actually what happens at home, and the teachers are the secondary educators. In other words, we're talking about religion, we're talking about what has been discussed. It actually happens in how we grew up in our home. And then, of course, you go to school and you learn, especially the thing that you're talking about. And probably one of the things I'm coming from here is a concept of decolonizing what we are, the curriculums in schools. Professor Masuma?
Thank you so much, Prof. Three things I just wanted to raise. The relationship between theory and practice. That we provide schooling for almost 12 years of theory. And when the child is at matric or just before completion of matric, then we talk about entrepreneurship. Instead of blending entrepreneurship at grade R, because children are amenable to doing at that age. But if you introduce entrepreneurship in 12 years, then you have a problem. Second is the ability to identify skills and hone skills for developmental state, a state that needs development. In which way would education address that? In which way would education address that? And the last thing is about cooperation. We infuse competition rather than cooperation. And we are surprised at the behavior of children. If I, with my team, we work together, we study together, and I get a distinction, this distinction is not mine alone. It's because of the efforts of the team that I was working with. But you singled me out. Say, this is the best one. Yeah? And yet there has been a contribution of all of us to make you get the distinction. We need to begin to revisit the way we educate our children. Yeah? For cooperation rather than competition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think it's Dr. Mufamadi there.
Thank you so much. I think the first thing that I want to raise, especially in our South African and probably African context, the fact that what we consider education is even offered in a foreign language. We first have to translate in our heads and try to make sense and meaning of what is required. That limits capacity and potential to young people. I think we need to, if we're serious about educating our young people, we need to seriously consider the issue of the language of instruction in education. The other thing that was raised, partly I think by Inkosebe and Prof, is the integration of our knowledge systems. The current system of education, and I will talk about Africa because I know that better. it's not for me education, it's certification, it's training job seekers. If we're serious about education, we need to embed the values. Our indigenous knowledge systems have their own schools. And with the abolishment of those indigenous schools, the lessons that were taught there were not integrated in the what we call the curriculum today. So we take our kids for training to seek jobs. They don't learn the values. Yes, there is life orientation. In fact, basic education had what we call values in education. But when you look at what is being offered, it leaves much to be desired. In fact, the educators don't even know what to include in that section of the curriculum. And in fact, it's not in the curriculum, it's called extramural activities. I think we need to integrate the life values. And the role of faith, in my view, look, other religions have schools. You have Christian schools, you have other religious based. The risk with that is the unintended discrimination. Would these schools admit other kids of other religions? And when that happens, how are the outsiders, if I may use that word, how are they treated within those religious-based schools? I think what we need to focus on is the values we derive from our different religions. What does religion teach us? That which we hope to attain through our different religions should be that which unites us. And if you look beyond the religious dogma or rituals and you look at the intention of those dogmas, and then you use that as a solidarity and uniting point. We extract the values from each religion and we use that as the basis to teach our children and infuse that. I think will go a long way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Our dear brother here. And then I think I saw a hand. Was Joanne? Okay.
Thank you. In the second day of our forum, in the plenary session, often we discuss it more deeply in the breakout sessions, is the education for solidarity. So there is a key word here when we discuss about education for solidarity, and it is closely related to my sisters. But the key word is cross-cultural religious literacy. So these words must be clearly the message of IF Interfaith Forum 20 in South Africa. And this message should be addressed, of course, the first is for African context, South Africa. The second one is for all us, the participants of IF20. But the most important one, as Catherine Marshall asked, to address this message to the G20. G20 will be held here in November, so this clear message should be addressed to them that the world today need what we called yesterday cross-cultural religious literacy, and it is closely related with my sister's suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Lynn.
Right, so I'm going to be brief because I think I've mentioned this in a couple of other sessions, but I don't want it to be lost. I want us to be able to also have it distilled on a list that is passed on. And that is just hearing about all of our concerns and the lack of coping skills that young people have. And the privilege I had at a very late stage in my life of learning about the missing puzzle piece, which is actually just like thinking about how our brains work. and little ones, like 5-year-olds. There are a couple of schools in New York where a neuropsychiatrist has introduced teaching little kids, saying, imagine this is your brain, right? And inside you've got that caveman kind of person, right? That's your reflexive brain. And then over here is your discipline, and that, of course, is our temporal lobe, right? But they get to know this is a discipline area. And when we get upset and we flip our lids, then our caveman comes out. And that's how they teach the kids about the fight and flight response. And so when they go into the that's all they need to really remember when they go into the playgrounds and bullying starts occurring. So, but this then feeds and fuels the values, the understanding of each other, not because you're this culture or that color or that gender. This is how everyone across the world operates. And so that understanding, the understanding of how bias actually happens in the very first place, I believe needs to be proactively introduced at a young stage.
Very, very much. How much time do you still have there? Do you, Stuart? Yeah. Do we are on time. I think, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more that many of you would like to make recommendations for. And as I'm listening to you, there's something that came to my mind is what Professor Jonathan said. He says, keep religion out of schools. He said that happens at home. Now, I'm not sure how many of you would want to agree with that, but that is something which he mentioned yesterday. I'm not too sure if you all picked up on that. You know, he said school is for a different environment altogether. You have a pressing issue?
Not pressing, sorry, I'm just came in late. But just wanted to contribute, if I can, to the discussion, and I really agree with that. And every context is very different. I've worked in schools for the last 2 decades, and what I've been asked to do usually is to come in and listen, compassionately listen to what's going on and to support. And what I've seen over the years is that, as you said, education normally comes from the home, but the home needs to be supported. The teachers need to be supported. And we know that if we ourselves are not feeling okay as parents or as teachers, is that we dysregulate our children. So it's so important to be able to look at it holistically and be able to address our teachers, our parents, and our children all together in community. That's where, you know, where children feel part of. It's like if they were sitting here, they know what they need, and they need their voices also, you know, so it's not education over, as we say, power over, but with and together, because they do know their needs. And so to the gentleman's point around compassionate or caring intentions, that can be embodied and taught at a very young age, where we are wishing each other well. We don't have to compete. And also in terms of values, if we look at the values of patience, of generosity, of humility. These are things we embody, and these things we can cultivate, and they're actually very easy to do when we become tender. And I'm just reflecting on yesterday how everyone's hearts opened up when someone on stage became tender. Everyone became tender, and it's this type of thing that really changes ourselves and each other. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I think we are dodging something here, because the theme of the conference says Ubuntu in action. And Madiba gave us a solution about the reconstruction and development of the soul, RDP of the soul. My brother's just spoken about insouling. So at the end of the day, we want a bridge between all the religions. And Ubuntu is that bridge. I don't agree with Professor Johnson, who says religion out of the schools, because he has not come around to understand that we don't need religions in schools. We need spirituality in schools. As Madam Dr. Mfumadi said, we must extract the values from all the religions. When we extract all the values, they lead you to one thing: humanity, African humanity, Ubuntu. Because if I see you in me and you see her in you, there can be racism, there can be ethnicity, there can be there can be tribalism. So our problem is we undermine anything that comes out of Africa, and that's why it's difficult for people to accept that Ubuntu transcends racism, religion, and so on. Because if you say introduce religion in schools, do you want the kids to be taught Christianity? In Christianity, we have sects, so many sects. You go to Islam, you have the Shiites and the Sunnis. So the only thing that transcends all these divisions is Ubuntu. So I propose that when we end this conference, we must say that there is a value system that transcends all these divisions, and that is Ubuntu. Let the world for once accept that Africa has something to offer that can help the world, the whole world, and that is Ubuntu. Thank you.
No, I think that is really very true, and we need to conclude because I've just got to meet now the Deputy Minister that's just arrived as well. I think as faith communities we can do still much more than what was discussed. A bridge that gets washed away, that cannot be repaired immediately, which inhibits children from attending schools. What can the religious communities do? Come together and say, we're going to build this bridge for our children to get to school. Children that do not have food, they don't even have a breakfast in the morning and they're going to school. How do they learn on an empty stomach? We as religious leaders need to come alongside that student and say, or that community say, we can assist as a religious community. This is Ubuntu, this is in action, isn't it? Reaching out to our fellow beings and assisting them. And so I think the religious communities can be involved in many ways to assist our students. I know universities have got significant drives at the moment to raise funds for our students, to develop feeding schemes for our students, because we had students who used to sleep in the libraries of our universities because they could not go home. They never have taxi fare to go home. Now, we, in as much as we say government, but I think we as religious communities can make a big difference if we can just put our heads and our hands and our legs and everything to this plow and make it work. So I think those are just things that you can also think about, and you're welcome to continue the discussions, but we have to conclude officially. But I want to say thank you so much for your contributions. I think it was really excellent, and I think your recommendations has been taken up, and I think it will be discussed eventually, and probably a policy document might emerge from that. So thank you very, very much, and enjoy the rest of the day until we conclude.